Hey everyone, welcome to the Horror Show Podcast. I'm Cecil Laird.
And I'm producer Dave.
And we are back. Did you turn down?
What? No.
Okay, we're good.
Turn down for what?
We are back continuing the What Scares Producer Dave series here. What that means is we're basically doing a podcast and going two horror subgenres at a time while we talk about other stuff as well.
Tangents.
So far we have covered... Hang on, I wrote it down. I don't want to get it wrong. So,
Ghost.
Well, that's Bob Majorly.
We did found footage.
Dave Pods. Episode 1 was Ghosts and Torture Porn, and we talked about a few of your Robert Conway movies.
Right.
And then episode 2, we talked about creatures and found footage, as well as talking about my Black Friday haul, I believe.
Yeah.
Possibly my Cyber Monday haul.
Right.
And now, episode 3 is where we're at. So part 3 of the What Scares Producer Dave. And this time, I am going to focus... I know the first thing I'm going to focus on, and then we'll talk about our subtopic, which is basically the origins of the horror show. I know we've covered this once or twice in the past, but this is going to be our most recent version of it. So... The subgenre I want to go with today, which is one that you actually sort of brought up at the end of the last podcast, was the horror classics.
Yeah.
So I'm guessing, I don't know exactly what you meant. Yeah, cheers to the classics. This is a very cheers-ish Christmas episode, if you can see the lights in the background, barely.
Prepare yourselves, audience, for you're about to potentially learn something that you did not know.
All right. Wow, that's setting the bar high.
So, I actually consider one of the very first horror films of all time to be Train Coming Into Station.
Okay. Yeah, well, it was meant to scare the audience.
Well, I don't think it was meant to scare the audience, but people literally jumped out of their seats and ran for the hills.
Yep.
The idea of a train coming directly at the camera very early on freaked people out. And I think right then and there, filmmakers and people understood the value of the jump scare / horror nature of film, and that you could finally safely observe something which you would normally not want to be anywhere near, such as werewolves, vampires. All the classic horror folklore was brought to life in the early 30s by Universal and by a lot of independent studios.
You just pretty much, in a nutshell, summed up why I believe horror is the ultimate genre of movie making.
I don't know if it's the ultimate genre of movie.
I think it absolutely is.
I think it's
the most successful one.
I think it's the most primal one. It's the foundation of all film, in a way. Fear is by far the one emotion that you would want to experience in a safe, controlled environment. Yeah, joy and all that other stuff, you want to experience that with people and all this other stuff. But fear was the one thing that, like, you could go to a theater, you could be scared for a couple hours, and then you go home. You didn't stop being scared, though.
You're skirting the edges of the argument that I always make, which is movies.
I agree
movies, period.
Yeah.
No, I know. I'm restating it for the audience that hasn't heard.
Okay, it's a little cold.
It's not to me at all. Movies, to me, have always, like, the point of them is to make the audience feel something.
Yeah.
Right? And to me, I've always felt...
Art is to evoke...
I've always felt that comedies, heavy dramas, and horror movies are the most successful in that attempt. And what I mean by that is that, you know, filmmakers, the whole point of making a film, making a movie, is to make the audience feel something. And in my estimation, heavy dramas, like this person's dying of cancer and having to say goodbye, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Comedies and horror movies are the three most successful genres of movies to achieve such feats.
Yeah.
As to transport the audience into a different place where they themselves might not be in a position in their own lives to feel these feelings, and yet watching these three specific genres of movies make them feel. And to me, touching on the point that you made, horror is the most successful at this because the drama stuff and the comedy stuff could actually happen.
Well,
the horror stuff...
Horror is the one genre that can have all of the other elements in it and still be a horror genre.
Well, but the point I'm driving at is that it's the one genre that these things can't happen to you.
Yeah.
The ghosts, the exorcist stuff. Sure, there's going to be some audience members like, it can, but look, there's not a single police report through all of history that says death by ghost. There's not a single police report through all of history
let's
that
not
says
say there's
death
not
by possession.
one. I mean, there might be one.
Okay, but
yeah,
not one
in
that's
general,
lent any credence to.
In general, it's
so what I'm
assumed
saying,
that there haven't been that many ghost deaths.
Everything in these horror movies, yes, okay, there are real life slashers, there are real life serial killers.
If you were a detective, how would you put that death down?
I'm saying, if there were enough instances, you would have to. You would have to. You're telling me that that the instances are so few and far between that it's that easy to cover up. If it was happening that much in today's day and age, and I've said this before, if it's happening, listen, if it's happening this much in this today's day and age, and in this many cell phones out there, there would be way more evidence presenting itself on a regular basis proving this at this point. Because there are just cell phones and cameras everywhere. Yeah. And so some might say you can't capture that on cell phones and cameras. Bullshit, then what are all these ghost shows about? Right. Capturing all this stuff.
No, they're about selling advertising.
And all that. Okay, whatever. Point is, these horror movies are not only ways for people to feel things that they don't normally feel in their everyday lives, like heavy drama and like heavy laughter in comedies, heavy scares they don't feel as well, but again, you can get heavy drama in real life. You can get heavy laughter in real life. You can't get a serial killer or Cenobites from hell or werewolves or, krakens or creatures, whatever. You can't get all of that stuff in these in real life in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah.
So that's why I think horror does as well as it does, and that's why I think it is the most successful genre. And that's why I always feel like in these podcasts, it's worth breaking it down into subgenres.
Yeah.
Because horror movies, you can make a horror movie for $2-3 million and come back with a $20-30 million take easy.
I was just going to say, like, everything that you just said, you could make an argument that there is no horror genre per se, and it's all these other genres have horror, can have horror elements in it, and sometimes they just have more horror than not. My point being is that it is a genre that encompasses all the other genres, and in order for a good horror movie, it's going to have drama, it's going to have comedy, it's going to have a little bit of love, it's going to have a little bit of all the other.
Drama won't need a bit of comedy, a bit of horror.
Correct.
And you're right.
But a
good comedy won't need a bit of drama and a bit of horror. But a good horror has a bit of drama,
will have
a bit of comedy.
Perfect balance of all those other things.
That is a really interesting point.
Well, and that's why I was saying before. I feel like
check out the big brain on Dave.
I feel like horror is the baseline of all art. Is that we, even for example, Dave is on a prehistoric kick.
Prehistoric crick. Got it.
And this is how it pays relevance to my everyday life.
All right.
You're about to learn, because we were discussing this.
Pays relevance. Let's stick with it.
We were discussing this a little bit before, and he's like, well, whatever.
I said save it for the podcast. Yeah, we're about to talk for an hour.
So imagine that you are back in the prehistoric times, when you and a group of maybe 15 people lived by whether or not you hunted together and caught something that night to eat. And you would gather around the fire at night, and you would be afraid of wolves and fucking...
I tell you, the first thing I would do if I was ever caught in a prehistoric land is I would build a elevated platform like in the Lost World.
There you go. That would be a very good start.
100%, that's what I would do.
Minecraft in real life. Yeah.
Dude,
just build a shelter.
Survive the night. Pulley system so I can drop down to grab, little compies to eat.
Wait. Before we make the pulley system, how are you going to make the rope? Do you know how to make the rope?
Yeah, I grab palm fronds and I start tearing them
palm
up
fronds,
and then tying them together.
We're not on a desert island. No,
we're not on a desert.
Yeah.
Where are we then?
Yeah,
Jesus.
Anyway, the point being is that when people used to gather around the fire, if you think about it, like we were all scared of stuff, and that is what binded us as human beings. Like. Mm-hmm. Being with other people.
Some might say that's what caused us to excel.
Absolutely.
And
like the herd, the herd mentality is seen in nature, but also
the need to surpass our predators.
The need to, surpass our predators and to protect ourselves from our predators, recognize our predators, which for humans eventually became more the elements than actual animals. For, when we first started out, right, it was beasts, dragons, saber-toothed tigers, and cave bears.
I wish dragons had actually existed.
Well, they might have.
No, they didn't.
Yeah, they might have.
There's no dragon boats.
Not in the sense of the legends, but in some sort of sense of a prehistoric concept of a dragon might have been the condor.
Okay.
Imagine the condor. An 18-foot wingspan, really cool giant bird dragons coming down and biting someone's fucking leg off. Anyway, my point being that fear has binded us. Fear binds people. And you see it today in our society, how governments and corporations and all these other multi-whatever nationals, they use a bit of fear and a bit of, hey, we got a solution to this fear. That's how they manipulate societies, and that's how, ever since that's how we work as human beings. And so when we are scared, it gets the adrenaline pumping, and we're addicted to that adrenaline. Give me that adrenaline.
So, okay. Anyway. So that was a long introduction to our podcast.
To the horror genre.
The horror genre, right.
A philosophical discussion
the
of
next subgenre that we're tackling is classic horror. So why did you say in the towards the end of the last podcast that classic horror sticks with you? Like, what is it about classic horror, and what do you refer to? Are you talking about the Universal monsters? Are you talking about Alfred Hitchcock? Are you talking about like all the black and white stuff?
Yes.
Like what?
Metropolis.
Okay.
Metropolis was the first sci-fi film, but I feel like it was just as frightening to people to see it.
Sure.
As Psycho would be. Now, Psycho had obviously...
So what is it about classic horror that does it for you then?
Well, like I said, it was the first time that some of these tales had been brought to life. Vampires, werewolves.
Sure.
The idea of even a zombie or a rising from the dead ghoul or ghosts or, for example...
So you like the origins of the tales.
Because, I'm obsessed with history, and I'm obsessed with this idea of like... There was a time when we attributed. I'm
keeping all that in.
No. There was a time when we attributed all things to the gods. And over time, we became masters of these things. And there became just the one God for most of Western society. There are billions of people in the world who believe in multiple gods still. And there are billions of people who don't believe in God. All right, maybe not billions, maybe a billion. Whatever. My point being that for the longest time, little things like we didn't understand temperature and all these other things. So fear comes from that. Fear comes from the unknowing. For example, I cannot think of... I wanted to use this as an example. I was trying to vamp until I came up with it. But Outlander. Okay, Outlander is a great example of...
The creature movie?
Yeah.
Okay.
A great example of a horror film, which...
starring Jim Caviezel.
Right,
Jesus
absolutely.
H. Christ himself.
But let's imagine a medieval town, a prehistoric town, that experiences this, a visitor from outer space and a creature from another world that comes and terrorizes them, and the metal and the concepts that he brings. When we look at history, that is how they interpreted these things. There are stories like this. There are stories of people who rose from the dead, people who turned into monsters. And so the idea that we then took these stories and turned them into film is where I think the classics come from. the idea is that these stories that we can't really think of it well as modern people because we have the internet and we have access to everything. But you got to understand that as a person in 1930 or 1935, you had only ever heard like, hey, every October grandpa tells the story about the fucking werewolf. And you'd only ever heard it from your grandpa. And then all of a sudden...
War of the Worlds was always only on one day of the year that they would replay.
Well, that was a little bit later with the radio and everything.
But I'm saying...
Or earlier with the radio. But yeah, but that's the whole point, is that, like, fiction was new to people. So when you presented something that was completely made up, like Orson Welles did, people believed it.
And that like is the original Nosferatu.
That is a symbolism. That is like I said before, that is what goes back to being around the campfire and being afraid, is that it's not hard to tell a ghost story. Go out with your friends into the woods, light a campfire, and just make up some fucking crazy ass shit story to scare the shit out of them so they won't sleep. And I'm telling you that is how we entertained ourselves / controlled ourselves for many thousands of years. And so horror...
I can't tell you how many iterations of the thump on the outside of the whatever ended up being the head of the girlfriend that walked for help from the Hook Man. You know?
The Hook Man.
Whether it was on a car or at a house or whatever, the thump at the door, the thump was always the head of the person that went for help. Like,
well, and the idea that no matter what genre of horror that you personally love, you can look back at the classics and see where it all came from. See many of the early like jump scares, which were not modern jump scares, which used the sound and the quick edit or maybe the slow build-up edit.
The jump scares here were literally the reveals.
The reveals. When the Mummy came out.
Or when you finally got the full shot of Frankenstein.
People screamed. They're like, ah! like it freaked people out. And we don't get that anymore.
No.
Like,
well, sometimes we do.
When you watch your
Not
kid.
often.
Yeah, when you watch your kid for the first time watch these things, that's the only enjoyment you're going to ever...
I got a little bit of that when I watched the new It for the first time at theater, when it was huge in the garage and it like lunged at people. That Pennywise scared the crap out of me. So it can still happen.
So let's just sum up the classics with the fact that one of the reasons why I respect the classics and I love the classics in general is not because they scare me per se, because there have been other films that scare me worse than, Nosferatu.
Sure.
But
Dracula was boring as hell in my opinion.
Like I said, like I'm obsessed with the history stuff. Like you get to see what scared the people 75 to 125 years ago.
And that part is interesting. And I don't even like history, but thinking about that does interest me. I wish I would have done the research and wrote all these films down. But there was these films that did very early, what do we call it? A fade, not a fade, but dissolve. There was these films. A good dissolve.
There was these films that did these early dissolves where people would appear they'd be like ghostly figures.
Sure.
And
opacity.
There had to be, like, I know how stupid there are people out there because I see their comments in YouTube, not on our channel, but on other channels, I see their comments and I'm like, wow, there are that stupid people out there who would just believe that this was a ghost captured on this film. And so you could see, like, the draw. Like, someone would go out and say, I saw a ghost. And be like, what? Yeah, it was on a film. You paid a nickel and you get to see it. All right, well, I'll scrape together a nickel to go see this ghost. And holy shit, that's what everybody says a ghost looks like.
And now, by our standards, translucence equals ghost.
Right.
For sure.
And you got to understand, too, that the horror genre also comes from the freak show.
Yeah.
The freak show is probably as the carnival, the carny. I don't want to use carny or gypsy, whatever.
They're carnies.
The freak show, the carnies, the gypsies, the people who were born special but unique. And I don't mean special and unique in a bad tense. I mean that as a reverence. As people who back in the day were obviously revered because people paid to come see them. You might have been a dwarf, and people might have paid you a fucking copper coin to pat your head for good luck. And you would have been like, this fucking guy's an idiot. Thank you. This guy's an idiot. Thank you. Like,
they would have felt demeaned, I'm sure.
No. That was the thing. I think that's what the carnivals and the freak shows did for those people, was that they were with their people and they realized that there was money to be made.
There's value.
There was value to being different and being unique and being frightening and grotesque. Like if you had a giant growth on your face.
A bearded lady.
Well, yeah, bearded lady. A lady who had too much testosterone in her system. Or a hormone.
Fat woman, too.
Or, and again, because she would...
Hormone imbalance.
She would not necessarily need to... She would be a sedative. She would she would sit and eat and blah, blah, blah. And people would come to her, and that's how she would make her living. My point being is that the horror genre comes with people's fascination. And the classics were the best example of where all this fascination comes from. And I think like stories like Snow White Sleeping Beauty and the Three Pigs and all these grim fairy tales, I think nowadays we're making them back how they were intended. They were these dark and frightening tales that you told around the campfire. We realized
the value in the original.
To scare the shit out of your kids so that they didn't fucking do shit that pissed you off. And so you said Krampus was going to get you. You said these things to control people.
Susie says she uses Krampus. So.
Hey, maybe that can be how we broaden our step to the next topic.
All right.
So the classics I feel like we've tackled. Obviously, some of my favorites are the 70s, late 70s, early 60s Alfred Hitchcock's. I do love Rear Window. I love every iteration of Rear Window, and I think Rear Window would be like one of these great fucking stories. This is one of these great horror stories.
Disturbia did it well. Summer of '84 did it well.
I feel like these stories are old and ancient, but like we just keep retelling them in the ways that we can understand them. And so the idea that you had observed potentially a murder and that you were stuck in a place and you were just watching this person and the paranoia and the suspicion grows, and I think everybody can attest to that. I'm Bob Dole and I'm holding the pen. I just think that everybody can attest to that, and there's something that is universal about being scared.
Yeah.
So
agreed.
And I think there are a lot of films that were lost. Experimental films that showed human sacrifice and all this other stuff. I'm sure that there were documentary films made of early primitive contact where we did see these sorts of things. And our fascination with it has never waned. We would go to the Coliseum to watch men die. We want to see the blood.
Yeah.
And it reminds us that we are mortal and all these things. And I think that's where the classics come from. And I think that's what the classics teach us. And I think even films like Gladiator could be considered a horror film. Because what is the worst horror than becoming a slave and having to fight a tiger? And
it's a bit of a stretch, but sure.
There's no supernatural aspect to it if you don't believe in the gods and all this other stuff. But my point is that all great films have an element of horror to them, where the fear is overcome somehow and the beast is conquered.
Sure.
And I think that is what the classics started, at least for film.
So do you want to move on to one other subgenre and call it, or do you want to go ahead and go into the origins of the show for this episode?
Well, let's.
We ended up talking about that one a bit longer than I anticipated.
Well, there you go.
So we could do another.
And
subgenre.
We should have started with that one, really. But hey, if you've gotten
we
this
had to
far,
pick up from the last one because you mentioned classics, so we had to go into classics. You want to go into subgenre, or you want to go into the history?
Yeah, we can talk about the history. I mean, I think we've talked about the history before a little bit.
We can do a bit of an abridged version.
So the short version. I was working on horror films with a gentleman, and he. Well, first of all, I watched a lot of YouTube from the get-go. From 2009 on, I was addicted to YouTube. And one of the things I was addicted about was like all these people were uploading all this content that I had no access to. So that was the first couple of years of YouTube, for people who don't know, was VHS content that we didn't have access to, and that you couldn't go on the internet and find a movie or a film that people that wasn't on DVD, that wasn't, you know, any of this other stuff. And then people also they uploaded videos of like America's Funniest Home Videos. That was the beginnings of YouTube, was this stuff. And then people started uploading do-it-yourself videos, and those got really popular. And then people started, you know, creating content, vlogs, and all this other stuff. Anyway, the evolution of YouTube came to the point where around 2010-11, which was about 3 years into YouTube, I was working on films, and the director or the producer of these films wanted to start a YouTube channel that would promote independent films. So films that weren't studio backed. This was before Patreon. This was before a lot of these Indiegogo sort of like crowdfunding sites. And so the idea is that you would sort of like, you'd make a trailer, and then you'd make this video where you would interview the people who made the film. And so the people who made the film would be more interesting than the film itself. And the idea was that you would promote independent people making films / horror films / you know, artwork. And so that was the very basic idea for a show. And so he approached me and he said, "Hey man, I got this idea for a YouTube show. Do you know anybody who would be good to host it?" And I said, "Well, yeah, maybe I know a guy. He's obsessed with horror films. He knows all of them." I'm like, "But, you know, he's going to be his own thing probably. Like if you approach him with this idea, he'll want to make it his own and whatever." And so that's what initially happened was the original concept was this sort of promotions channel, which you can look at channels like Watch Mojo or some of these other channels, and you can kind of see where this original channel would have gone to. We would have been in like a top 10 channel. There would have been no personality to the channel. The channel would have been positive reviews of shitty movies. Okay?
Promotional vehicle at best.
Now, in a spirit of that is what the horror show started out as, and it is still that.
Well, it started out as a variety show. It never started out as a promotion.
No. I mean the spirit of it. The spirit of it is that we do want to promote the independent horror person,
that much, yes,
who creates horror stuff and sells horror stuff. That is what that's the thing. That's what I got from him, and that's what I brought to Cecil. And I said to Cecil, who I knew as Drew at the time, I said, "Drew, Cecil, here's an idea for a show. What do you think?" And he's like, "Well, here's a fucking notebook of ideas." So those two things are not the same. It's like, you know, a rock and a fucking whatever, you know, and a piece of grass. They're just two different things. And what happened was you just kind of took it. And you're like, "Okay, well, I'll do this. I'll meet the couple of people that you guys know, Steve Wargo and SWAT HD Productions being one of them."
And for the casting call.
Yeah, and then casting, and then some casting help, and then some other things. And so what people don't understand about producers and all this other stuff is oftentimes that is all a producer does, is they'll just put the right people together at the right table, and then they're like, "Okay, go for it. Make art for me, and then let me make some money." Well, if you've started your own YouTube channel, or if you watch young YouTube channels, you'll know that there isn't money to be made, and that this became more of a hobby and a passion than a promotions channel.
Well, not only that, but very quickly, because when Dave presented it to me, just to sort of jump in real quick, he did present it as me being the host of this sort of promotional channel where we talked to local filmmakers about their local movies that they were trying to get attention brought to them. And I was like, "Oh, that's a good idea, except you could also do this. You could talk about new movies. You could, you know, talk to other filmmakers. You could do this and that." And I like told Dave like about all these ideas as I had them, and he told them to this other person that originally had the idea, and that other person basically said, "This is now bigger than I ever wanted it to be, so I'm gonna step away."
Yeah.
So the person that sort of tried to bring me in as a host,
well, the person wanted
was
to
intimidated by the idea.
The person whose original idea was it to put me with a host and a couple other people together, realized that it was going to be something that was going to be a lot more work than just putting out a video whenever there was a new film coming out.
Mm-hmm.
Because one of the things that I brought to the table was this knowledge of YouTube, this knowledge of, hey, here's what's successful on YouTube right now, and here's what's doing well. And that you have to understand that YouTube isn't necessarily people, it's a fucking algorithm.
Mm-hmm.
And that you have to go with the flow. You can't go upriver. You have to go downriver with the fucking flow of YouTube.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what we set out to do. And from the get-go, like I said, it was something completely different than that was originally interned. Mm-hmm. And so, you know...
Well, that first season we filmed for about a month ahead of time. Mm-hmm. And then we ended up editing for about a month because the whole first season was, I think it was...
40 episodes, 43 episodes, something like that?
It was, yeah, it was like 40 episodes presented in 31 days. And yeah, we did an episode a day at that point, and we did Monday to Saturday.
Yeah.
So we did 6 episodes.
What's funny is...
So yeah, we did a total of like 24 episodes, plus some extra ones in that first month. And we got them all edited and all ready to go. And now we do 2 episodes a day, which is, you know, way beyond that. But
well, I was going to say
we were doing clips and stuff at the time.
I think that was
movie clips.
Part of our bit off more than we can chew aspect of our early seasons was that we were like, hey, we need to have content every day or every other day or something like that. When in reality, when you're first starting out on YouTube, that's wrong.
Well, we did a month. We burned out all our first season episodes, and then we took another 3 months to put together season 2.
The key to building a YouTube audience, and let me give you the secret right now, is when you start...
Consistency.
Consistency. If you start with once a week, just stick to once a week until you have a set goal in mind, 10,000, 15,000, whatever subscribers. And then you go to maybe twice a week. And you don't go crazy like we did and then you lose your audience because people tune in. They're like, oh shit, there's a video every day. And then 3 months, no videos. Back in the day, YouTube's fucking algorithm, well, if you hadn't watched our video in 30 days, well, we didn't get into your fucking feed. And so if we didn't get into your feed, you became one of those lost subscribers, which obviously many of our videos get thousands of viewers. But a lot of our videos get around 250, 300 views or whatever.
They get lost.
And it's because of that. It's because we do produce that many videos.
Yeah, that's why I'm season 6. I kind of want to drop down to 1 a day again.
Well, what I think is most important,
or at least 1
now,
a day, and then do 1 a day for the patrons too, if we're going to continue. A day.
Well, and here's the thing, like there are people who want to see every minute of every content that we do. And those people are probably less than 1,000 people. And then there are thousands of people who want to see our up-to-the-minute content, it seems like. It seems like the most views we get are the stuff that we produce that is
reactions that drop right away.
And so we never set out to be a reaction channel, and we never really wanted to be a reaction channel. Well, I never really wanted to be a reaction channel.
Not really.
One of the things that I do enjoy, though, is building a community. And so if people enjoy seeing our reactions to things, that is part of our community, and that is something that I think is important. And so, like you said, if we only do 1 a day in season 6, or if we do, maybe we do 1 a day, but then every once in a while we have a really good content video. Because that is one of the things that Cecil and I have been talking about in 2019 is doing a few more shorts.
Yes.
It's been a while since we've done any shorts. We've done any comedy content.
Years at this point. Oh.
And
So disappointing.
Let us know in the comments below if you think that we should do more shorts. Obviously, there's going to be at least 7 comments.
Well, we're writing one.
Do it.
I know what our next short's going to be, and it's going to involve a little bit of green screen action, but it's going to be fun, for sure. So, yeah, I mean, that's kind of the history.
Yeah. So let's take a short break on that note.
Okay. All right, before we take a break, we'll just go ahead and call it.
Well, that was that was the whole idea. It was the break. The break was that you guys go and click the link and buy a T-shirt and coexist or whatever.
Exactly.
Horrific Harry, whatever you like about our show. We could use your support, and if you give us that support, we'll make better fucking content. It won't just be us sitting around a table
of season 6
talking about shit. All right.
So yeah, we're gonna call that as What Scares Producer Dave, episode 3.
We covered the classics.
We covered the classics and then the show Origins. So we'll move on from there, and I do want Mercer to come take part.
Yeah.
To talk about Encounter as well. So hopefully he'll be down to do that in the next few days. But
and if you guys want to hear more about the experiences of working on some of these films, Cecil himself got to work on the Sickle. Well,
Exit to Hell.
Exit to Hell. Well, no, it was called Sickle at the time, and then it got changed to Exit to Hell. And again, like I always give a grain of salt to all the people that I've ever worked with, like despite my own personal feelings or whatever. I always try to like respect the idea that you and I, we work really hard to make this show, and it may not be the best show on YouTube, but we have a lot of fun making it, and we love the fact that people enjoy it.
Indeed.
And if you do enjoy it, or if you hate it or whatever, we're glad that you watch. And so
thank you for that.
That is why we do this, and so thank you. And you can finish what you were.
I don't remember what I was saying.
Well, you were wrapping up, and I wanted to say that before you wrapped up and started.
I'm glad. I appreciate it, guys. Thank you very much for watching. Until next time, I've been Cecil Laird.
And I've been Producer Dave.
And remember, stay scared. We'll be back with episode 4.